Jeff Booth raises a provocative question. Do wealthy people even need Bitcoin? Today we're reacting to his argument. From inheritance dynamics to generational preferences to why analog wealth doesn't translate into a digital world. Quite an interesting point about whether rich people actually need Bitcoin at all, in his view. If there's only one reason where I generally believe that they need Bitcoin, is to do with their heirs. When they inherit the wealth, so when the boomers, let's say, are no longer with us and they have to pass down their wealth, whether it's real estate, stocks, yachts, arts and collectibles, the heirs are not going to be interested at all in receiving that wealth in the 20th century style analog asset. So that is a big concern for the boomers, who are starting to scratch their heads and think, well, what other asset can I generally pass on to my heirs who don't think the way I think? So that in itself is reason enough for them to consider at least converting their analog assets into Bitcoin. But there are other explanations as given in the clip. These institutions that I made reference earlier on, whether it's governments, authorities, banks, law enforcement, city councils, they're all under the old fiat system, which is heavily controlled based and only serve the few, the powerful. And where there's unrest, and there is unrest, and we have seen in history that no matter the governments that take control of these institutions, or no matter the central bankers that take the realm of the printing machine, there is going to be unrest. There is certainly that breakdown of trust in such institutions. And as a result, this impacts gravely on all of us that are reliant on those institutions to behave in a equitable, egalitarian, trustworthy sense, right, for the will and the interest of the people. And of course, most of these individuals are career politicians. So what I'm trying to say here is there isn't such thing as a trustworthy institution. Really, the only asset that is free from fiat, free from traditional finance or TradeFi is Bitcoin. It acts more as an equalizer asset in that it's the only way to protect at least a proportion of your assets. So going back to the early example of the boomer generation, who need to start worrying about the best means of passing on their wealth, is to start converting those 20th century style real estate properties or yachts or arts and collectibles and even stocks into Bitcoin, because the Gen Zs aren't going to be at all interested in receiving or inheriting that wealth. They would be interested in Bitcoin, certainly on stablecoins, and indeed digital assets would be my pick for the Gen Z generation and beyond, right? Because this is where the wind is blowing, mainly because Bitcoin, as I explained earlier on, is the only egalitarian system that we have that protects that wealth in a completely open, fair and transparent way in the decentralized network, which is Bitcoin. There's only going to be 21 million coins in circulation, so in that sense it's the most scarce asset that we will ever have in human history. So even the rich aren't going to be insulated from these problems of institutional control, taxation, counterparty risk. We all encounter the same issues and faced with the same predicament. And particularly when the fiat system collapses, and it will happen. Don't ask me when, but there is experts out there are predicting the demise of the fiat system. So the only solution there is to turn to Bitcoin, at least to convert some of your wealth. So if you're one of the boomers out there or Gen Xers who are thinking about writing their will and testament, they ought to consider converting their analog assets into Bitcoin. Booth's point isn't that the rich need Bitcoin today, it's that their heirs will. Wealth that can't be transferred across generations without friction or dilution isn't really wealth. Bitcoin solves that. That's all I have for you for today. If you value clarity on Bitcoin, blockchain technology and real assets tokenization, stay alert. Subscribe and enable all notifications to stay ahead of the curve. Share this episode with those who need to understand what's coming, friends, family and colleagues. This channel aims to deliver insight, no noise and no hype. Subscribe now.